If you love normal people, pick the book up. Okay, we're gonna try this again. I've already filmed this and the audio was not working, but this is my May reading wrap-up. I had a total of 8 books, DNF'd 2 of them. The other 6 either had physical copies, an audiobook, and everything else was on my Kindle. So I want to go ahead and go over everything, give you my ratings, my thoughts. I started the month off really strong, but I guess we could just start with the book that I no longer have a physical copy of. I went to a free little library about 2 days ago and I just left it there. The book in question is How to End a Love Story. Is that what it's called? Yes, it is called How to End a Love Story. I read that book because I dedicated a week to reading only romances, so that was a book in that video. And I had to DNF it because I don't like how fast-paced it was. It was extremely contemporary. I read contemporary, but to a certain extent. When they start talking about social media platforms and things like that, it's harder for me to stay engaged. And on top of that, I didn't like the pacing. It was going way too fast. I didn't care about the characters. It was more of the author telling us things instead of showing it. And I really don't like that in books. So that's more of a hard DNF for me. I don't really see myself picking it up in the future and trying to read it again. But I do want to encourage everyone else, if you're interested in it. I do know a lot of people that really, really loved it. So still recommend giving it a shot. There are 2 outliers in this stack, and then everything else is pretty much just romance. There's some that's more lit fic, there's some that's more contemporary, and then there is a rom-com. So a little bit of everything in the romance category. Let me start with the 2 outliers. So the first one is going to be Monstrilio. Monstrilio is a literary horror type of story, and this is by Gerardo Samano Cordova. This is a debut novel, which I love finding a really good debut. The best part about this, well, there's many really good things about it, but basically we follow these 2 parents who have just lost their son. The parents' names are Magos and Joseph. Their son's name was Santiago, and Santiago was born with a really small lung, so the doctor gave him a very low probability to live. He ended up living, I think, until he was about 11 around there, and he did pass when he was home in his sleep. So the mom goes into the room, sees the body, they start to grieve, the dad leaves, she goes back into the room, cut open his chest, cut out a little piece of his lung, put it in a mason jar, took that mason jar with her back to Mexico City to visit her mom and give the bad news. And then when they're eating, she's like, I'm gonna take a little bit of this caldito, put it in the mason jar. And then the little piece of lung started to grow. So this is influenced by Frankenstein a little bit. The premise is really interesting. The writing is so beautiful. There's 4 different POVs in this. So we have the parents, Magos, Joseph. We also have their mutual best friend, Lena. And then the last perspective is going to be M. Once the little lungs started to grow more and more, they decided to name it Monstrilio. And then towards the end of the book, they just call him M. And I do want to give a warning because I know not everybody's going to love this book, but I absolutely did. This was a pick for my book club. They were 50-50. I think a majority of people liked it, but there was definitely more people that felt on the fence about it, and then people that just flat out did not read it or had to DNF it. So it's not going to be for everybody, but I really loved it because through this story of the little monster, we're actually really focusing on their grief and how sometimes grief can be a very isolating thing and it impacts everybody completely differently, and how you process it and come to terms with it. There is no right or wrong way to act, so I really enjoyed having the 4 different perspectives because each character is kind of going through a different type of grief and they're handling it very differently. And then alongside that, the author's focusing on this big question of, through grief, it's really hard for people to accept the fact that they're no longer there. And sometimes the emotion just feels too much that you just want to cling on to any little bit of them that you can. And this book takes that question even further because it's like, well, you have this lung and now the lung is growing. And is it a replacement for your son? Is this completely different? And really pushing on the consequences of having this unconditional love for someone, because too much of anything is never good. So I think combining all of that together through this story worked out really, really well. I thought every character was really interesting. Initially, I didn't think that I needed a perspective of M, but when we got to his chapter or his section and we got to read it, I really appreciate that it was added. Obviously, check content warnings. There was a lot more sexual scenes than what I was expecting, but it felt intentional. It didn't feel misplaced, or it didn't feel like it was too much. just do be mindful that they are included. So if it is something that you're not interested in, just keep that in mind. This is definitely an author that I would read from in the future. I just really love finding a good literary horror book. So if you are interested in it, I highly, highly recommend. This was an easy 5 stars. The other book that is a bit different from everything else in this stack is Loneliness and Company by Charlie Dyref. This is another debut that was sent to me by the publisher. And this was sent to me because I constantly talk about Never Let Me Go, and they do follow kind of similar themes of overall questioning humanity. Similar themes, they reached out to me. I said yes after I read the premise. Basically in this story, we follow a character named Lee. Lee just graduated from her program, top of her class. She was waiting to go to a big 5 company as she was promised. Turns out she is sent somewhere else. This is set in a different type of New York City, so a little sci-fi, but that's not the focus of the story. The focus is Lee's journey because she was handpicked to help out this AI called Vicky. Vicky was created to tackle loneliness, which is an emotion that the government pulled from their emotional index. From there, we follow Lee as she collects data for this AI, and every week they're giving kind of a different focus. So you could focus on compassion, friendship, love, joy, things like that. So she goes out into the real world, starts collecting all this data, and because she was top of her class, she is a very overachieving type A type of person. So she puts herself in really questionable situations, and as the book goes on, the stakes get higher and higher. And I really like it because plot is more medium to fast paced, which doesn't make sense if I don't pick one. But if you compare it to other stories, I would say this one is much more engaging because of the plot, but don't pick it up because it says sci-fi, because the sci-fi is more a framework to assist with the overall question that it's asking, but it's not going to explain to you the world building and how it works and the school systems and all of that. When the emotional index was even created, it's just like, this is what it is, but this is what we're going to focus on. So that's kind of how the book goes. If that's something that really would bother you, then maybe don't read this one. But if you have read Never Let Me Go and you thought it was much too slow-paced and very melancholy, then you might enjoy this one much more because it is much of a faster paced book. It is still really engaging. I did a tandem read, so I listened to the audiobook while I read the physical book, so I recommend you do that. But what I loved it for the most is the overall questions of like, can you even tackle loneliness when you are in a room full of people? Can you still feel lonely? Are you able to teach AI something that we haven't been able to wrap our own minds around fully? I love when books tackle these types of questions and present them in very unique ways, like through this AI robot. Overall, I really liked it. I would give it a 4 out of 5. I would definitely have this author on my radar in the future. And if you've read any books that talk about the human condition, please comment them down below. I am always looking for something. They are my all-time favorite books to read about. Now for my Kindle. Actually, before I go into my Kindle, the other DNF. The other DNF that I had is a book called Blue Hunger. I had this as an ebook on my phone. That's the only way that I was able to get it. I can't find it at any bookstores. Wasn't available through any of my libraries. I have 2 different library cards. None of them had it. And I could only find it as an ebook on Scribd, or no, it's called Everand now. Point is, I started this book at the beginning of the month, and it's not long. It's really, really short, but I think because I kept jumping in and out of the story, and I would take a week, 2 weeks to go back into it, I wasn't able to establish and maintain a connection to it, and so I didn't really care for it. And I just decided this is more of a soft DNF. So we'll definitely pick it back up in the future. Just right now, I wasn't able to stay engaged with it, and I'd rather just leave it and not force myself through it. I couldn't even tell you what it's about. So that one is a soft DNF for the future. I have 2 books that I read on my Kindle. So the first one, I think, was Writers and Lovers. I'm really happy I ended up reading Writers and Lovers. This is a book that I feel so many people have already read and deeply love. I think this would be perfect if you are mainly reading literary fiction and want a little bit of romance or vice versa. The book was really, really fun. I think it'd be perfect for spring, summertime, and it was available on Kindle Unlimited. Kindle Unlimited has recently been coming out with such a better option. Their catalog has been expanding for other types of genres. I was browsing their selection when I was getting my hair done. I saw Writers and Lovers was there. I feel like so many people have already read it, so I decided to start reading it. And I finished it fairly quickly. In this book, we follow Casey. Casey is 31. She is a waitress. She is dealing through the unexpected loss of her mother. She's been working on this first draft of a book that she has been working on and off for about 7 years. That's pretty much the main plot that we follow, but there's also a subplot of various men who are also writers as they kind of flow in and out of her life and the different roles that they play within her life. This book was really engaging. It had me very giddy at moments with some of these men that she's meeting, and spending her time with. What I appreciate the most is Cassie's perseverance as she's trying to forge her path for getting her book published and focusing on something that she is so passionate about when all of those around her aren't really encouraging and it feels like they've kind of lost a spark themselves. And instead of continuing on in the arts and something that they enjoy, they've gone for more traditional careers and are just telling her at your age, like, just give it up. But her passion is the driving force throughout the book and is what kept me engaged, and I had a really good time reading it. This is definitely for people that are book lovers and writers and just really appreciate it. This was just such a nice book, and now I finally understand why everybody's loved it so much. I had a really good time with it. Now, the second book that I ended up reading for that Reading Romance in a Week video is actually Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This is the first time that I read by this author, and the reason why I picked this author up is because I always talk about how much I love Emily Henry. Emily Henry for me is a perfect combination of romance and literary fiction. Put them all together in her books, and I am a sucker for every single book that she publishes. So when people started recommending Abby Jimenez to me, I decided to look through all of her books. I read the synopsis of each of them, and the only one that caught my eye and thought maybe this is something that I would like is Yours Truly. Now, it did, but it was also extremely disappointing, and I gave this book the lowest rating all month. I had such high hopes for it. The first half, I was really engaged. I really loved it. I was having the best time reading the book. And then, I'd say maybe the last 75–80%, everything went drastically downhill, and now I'm rating this book the lowest for the month because what was that ending? Basically, we follow these two characters. They are both ER doctors. One of them just got transferred over to this hospital. Chief residency position is up for grabs. She wants it. They also recommend it to him. I'm saying she and him because I forgot their names. Anyway, we have Brianna and we have Jacob. They begin to communicate with letters because basically he wrote a letter to her apologizing for something. So they started to write letters back and forth. Eventually, things progress. They're both in really awful situations when they both meet. Brianna just finalized a divorce. Her brother needs a kidney donor. Anyway, Jacob, what was going on with him? The brother! I kind of forgot a couple of things, but now everything's coming back to me. His brother ended up getting with his ex-girlfriend, and now they're engaged to be married. And Jacob, stressed out, kind of blurted out to his family, I'm okay, everything's okay, I'm actually seeing someone. And then his family's like, okay, well, you're gonna have to bring her around. And so then he has to ask Brianna to be the fake girlfriend. There was something else that happened. A lot of things are going on, okay? But basically they are in a fake dating thing. And let me just start with that, the tropes. So many tropes in this book. It became a bit much. It became like, I don't know if you've ever read a book by Riley Sager, but Riley Sager always has plot twist after plot twist after plot twist after plot twist. After about 2, 3 tops, I'm over it. It just gets way too far out there. I no longer enjoy it. And personally for me, it kind of ruins it. Now I'm coming to find out that I feel the same way about tropes. At the end, I was like, this is way too much. Oh, and the trope that I hate the most was included at the very end. Just completely ruined my reading experience, which is why I'm rating it so low, and I did not like it. Before I went down this path, I really liked it, mainly because I liked Jacob. And the reason why I like Jacob is because he has a lot of anxiety, and I think the way that Abby Jimenez represented the anxiety, it literally felt like she was in my mind, because Jacob would be in a situation, and because the chapters are dual POV, whenever it was Jacob's chapter and he would be presented with a situation, and then in his head he would list off everything and like all of his concerns and his thought process through things. I was like, that's literally how I think. That is to a T how I think about situations and how I overthink situations. So I just really loved the mental health representation in this and how accurately his anxiety was depicted. I liked the banter between the two characters. I felt like that was really believable. So there were a lot of good things. I don't just want to bash on the book. Overall, there were a lot of good things that I liked. I think personally for me and my reading taste, way too many tropes. There was also the big miscommunication trope. I understood the first time, but then the miscommunication just continued and I was like, okay, again, too much. The amount of tropes were too much. I felt like the story dragged on. It could have ended much sooner. And I think because it dragged on and all those other things, I just ended up not really liking it as much. So that was my thoughts on that one. Unfortunately, it didn't work out as well as I thought, but that's okay. I can tell you about my 2 favorite books. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Now these were top tier. Some of the best books I've ever read. They are both beautiful love stories. They span over 20 years each. They just stole my heart and completely consumed my reading. I actually started with this one and then I ended with this one. I'm gonna start with this one. and we'll get into it. This is Talking at Night by Claire Daverly. If you love normal people, pick the book up. Pause the video, order the book, come back, and then we can talk about it together. You are going to love this. You are going to absolutely not want to put the book down. I promise you. I promise you, because it gave me everything that normal people gave me and so much more. And that is so hard to say because I've reread Normal People so many times. I've rewatched the show so many times. I need a show adaptation to this. This was just, let me tell you about it. I haven't even explained it to you. We start with two siblings and they're twins, Rosie and Josh. And Josh knows a guy named Will in one of his classes. They are in high school. Josh is helping Will with some tutoring. So Will goes to the house, Rosie sees him there. So they know of each other. They've talked a couple of times. They slowly start to build this kind of friendship. But when Will first saw Rosie at the bonfire, he just knew that there was an immediate connection with her. I'm getting all happy just talking about them again. Something awful happens. And then the book is divided into two other sections. So it's after and then long after. This big tragic accident that really changed the trajectory of everything else that's going on. And then we follow their lives as they kind of weave in and out of each other's lives and are there for each other at different points of their lives for the next 20 years. If you love a slow burn, if you love beautiful writing, if you love fully fleshed out characters, if you want a book that is going to make you cry, when I finished this book, I didn't even realize that I was holding in my breath until I read the last passage, the last sentence, and then I started crying. I can't tell you why, that's a spoiler. This book was so good. I absolutely loved it. It's a beautiful reminder of how short life is and to take advantage of every moment that you have, of every opportunity that you have. You see the people that you love, you tell them that you love them. It was a beautiful reminder told through a beautiful relationship that was also a friendship, and it just changed many, many times throughout their lives, and I loved it so much. And again, whatever book she publishes next, I'm going to read it. So this is what I started the month with, obviously 5 stars, and then I ended it. Can you guess what book I ended it with? Because I immediately, when I finished Talking at Night, went online and I was looking for any book that was similar. Please, I just wanted to read something similar to that relationship, in the book that came up time and time again is One Day by David Nichols. If you've read the book, if you watched the show, you know why that was my reaction. I was gonna give myself space between reading them. I think I gave myself a couple of days and then I jumped into this one. And funny enough, this book actually took me a bit longer to get into. I don't know what it was in the beginning. I was just struggling to get through it. We follow two characters, Emma and Dex. It is their graduating day. They spend one night together, and then from there we follow them every year, once a year for the next 20 on the same day, July 15th. And we get a glimpse into their life and kind of where they're at. Every chapter we jump between perspectives, and I love that we get a glimpse of both of their lives because they are completely different. When I was telling people that I was struggling to get into it, they said just watch an episode on Netflix and then go back. And I promise that'll be enough. And it was enough. I did watch an episode and then I picked the book back up, and then once I picked it up, I did not want to put it down. I finished this again very, very quickly. After that little hurdle that I got through, I became very attached to the characters and what was going on. And I really, truly love the dynamic between Emma and Dexter, because on paper, they're people that it doesn't make sense why they have a friendship, why they continue to communicate years after college. You block out all of the outside noise, and it's just Emma and Dexter, and they see one another, they understand one another, they know how to support and be there and just listen and help each other just escape from everything that's going on. And this a sense of comfort that they create for one another, and it's just so beautiful to see. And I think that connection that they built and that they continue to nurture as the years go on is just so beautiful. And I absolutely loved that I got to read about them together. And I'm so happy that I annotated, because I can easily tell that this is a book that I'm going to want to read and reread. And Emma follows life through this general theory that we get introduced in chapter 1, and then Dexter reminds us of it in the final chapter. And I think it's just so beautiful. Again, just another reminder to live your life fully, to the fullest, to love and be happy and cherish every moment that you can, because again, life is short and life is fleeting, and these moments are not going to last forever. So you should just appreciate them when you have them and be grateful that you get to experience life with these people and create these memories. And I'm just rambling on, but the book is so beautiful. This is split up into 5 different parts, and at the beginning of every part you get a different type of quote. There's a quote, my favorite is part 1. This is a quote from Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, and it says, "That was a memorable day to me, for it made great changes in me, but it is the same with any life. Imagine one selected day struck out of it and think how different its course would have been. Pause. You who read this, and think for a long moment of that long chain of iron or gold, of thorns or flowers that would never have bound you but for the formation of the first link on that memorable day. And that is just something that I keep thinking about well after I've read the book. There's a lot of other great ones. And I read this interview that the author did where he said he got the inspiration about Emma and Dex when he read this book, and there was a passage in the book about how people know your birthday, your holidays, they're going to hold significance because we're told that they hold significance. But people often don't think about all the random days that when we're living it, we don't know the significance and the importance that that day is going to have until well beyond that day. And then we think back and we're like, oh, that day actually held a lot of importance. And so that's what he wanted to focus on through just focusing on July 15th and everything that happens year after year on that specific day. I think the concept is really unique. Again, the characters, I'm just so hooked. And if you are the person that kind of fears whenever a book gets adapted into a film or TV, because obviously every media has to change for the platform that it's on, I think the show on Netflix, I haven't watched the film that Anne Hathaway is in, but from what I've heard and what I've seen, the Netflix show stays more true to the book and really respects the book. And I binge watched the show the second that I finished this book. I cried when I read this, I watched the show, and I cried some more, and then I rewatched certain episodes. I love episode 7, funny enough, because I think it's a big breaking point in their friendship, and I think they just really brought the book to life in the best way. If you are a fan of the book and for whatever reason you haven't watched the show, I really think you should. I really think you're going to like it. And I'm just shocked at how this book ended up becoming one of my favorites when I really thought that I wasn't going to like it. And I can definitely see myself adding this to my reread list, along with Talking at Night. They're similar, but they're different. So I recommend reading both of them. And if you've read both of them and you prefer one over the other, let me know which one it is. I'm really curious. I feel like I love both of them equally. All in all, that was everything that I read for the month of May. There was only one that didn't work out that well, but everything else was pretty solid, and I'm really happy with what I ended up reading. Let me know if you had any favorites this month. Which ones were they? If after this you have any recommendations for books that are similar to Loneliness and Company, or literary fiction, or books like Talking at Night in one day, please let me know. I would love to read them. And thank you so much for watching my reading wrap up. Okay, I'm gonna go rewatch the show.